Welcome to the garden here in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is part 7, believe it or not, of a very detailed tour video where we're just kind of naming pretty much all of the plants that are in this garden here. We normally do our tour videos a little different and just hop around to whatever's looking good that week. But this one is this is about 3 years into this project and just going through details. The front of the house, we're 2 weeks away from starting a project, putting new siding on the house. The front porch is going to be an A-frame up here instead of this metal roof that's currently over it. The rails change. Everything about the front of this house is going to be very different in a month. Well, you see this hopefully in a month. The next tour video you would see, which will be back to a kind of a normal hop around video. The front of the house, hopefully the house will be complete at that point. There's some giant azaleas up there that they're coming out. And we've known that all along, and then we're going to do a little bit of rearranging of some of the shrubs that are in these front beds. It's going to give us a chance to jump back in and design something and make something new, interesting. It's just a project we've known was coming. We just left the azaleas in place until then. It's a strange mix of different color azaleas that are probably as much as potentially 80 years old. I'm going to cut them back hard, dig them up, and hopefully give them away on Facebook Marketplace or something to folks in the neighborhood. We don't have a place for them, but they're still in great shape. I mean, amazing how long that those things have probably been on that foundation. This direction is south, and we're going to start here on the south part of the foundation bed and work our way toward the north across it. First up is this Edgeworthia, which has grown very fast for an Edgeworthia. It was just a tiny little thing. If you followed the channel, I think maybe 2.5 years ago or something when this thing was planted, it was, it was like this big, and it's really thriving over here. And this is, one of those late winter flowering things. So at this point, it's a foliage plant, and look how great of a foliage plant it actually is. And this is one of those plants that just really, they tend to grow pretty uniform without having to do any maintenance on them, which how great is that, right? That you don't really have to do any maintenance at all on these. And then of course you get that winter flowering that we get on them. But really, what a beautiful plant. It's interesting, it almost looks fake, honestly. Every leaf is perfect, every stem is perfect, the form of it is perfect. It's kind of wild. This is a sweet box down here, or Sarcococca. This is orientalis. There's several species of Sarcococca that we can use. This is another winter flowering plant. It has kind of tiny flowers that you smell a long time before you find them. But right on the bottom of the stems, you'll get these little tiny white flowers that are super, super fragrant. I'm gonna have to limb up this in time to get it off the top of them, but it's a great shade plant. Sweet box is the common name, and it is in the boxwood, in the boxwood family, and has that kind of perfect form that we expect from boxwood-like plants. Then this is blue-eyed grass. This it's not a true grass, and it actually flowers on the ends. It's done a lot of flowering already. There's a couple seed I see that have already set up here on top, but as it grows, it will continue to throw out some of these little blue flowers out on top of it. I think this one looks a bit dry to me. We just haven't had any rain in a while, and we haven't done any extra watering, so there's a few things out here that I think we're supposed to get thunderstorms this week. So I'm kind of hoping for that, and not wanting to come over here and water something that's well established, that's just kind of taking a break and waiting for some additional water. Next up is this Cestrum parqui, which is actually one of the funkiest smelling plants in this garden, and I don't even have to touch the leaves to smell it. It's interesting. These are, the Cestrum parqui is, I know it's a terrible invasive plant in Australia, but here in Zone 7 in Raleigh, North Carolina, it actually gets killed to the ground in the wintertime. We don't get any seeding from it, so it's not an issue for us. These flowers are probably were moth pollinated wherever they were originally, because the fragrance in the flower is actually at night. You can come over here and you get fragrance from the foliage, which is obviously to keep things from eating it, because it really is funky. And then you get nighttime fragrance in the flowers, so obviously some sort of moth or something. But we get hummingbirds on this thing all the time, and it sticks up big and tall, so anywhere we are in the garden, you can see the hummingbirds on it. Great looking plant. It dies to the ground, comes back with about 20 pieces from the bottom, which we then cut back down to 4 or 5, I think 1, 2, 3, just 4 this season that we've allowed to come up. And you can see it's a great looking plant, great for hummingbirds, just interesting color. It will not stop flowering until frost takes it down to the ground. So we're June 15th right now. This thing will not stop flowering. Every one of these terminal ends will flower, and then it'll get a side branch and it'll flower from there. So I don't think there's no shrub in the garden that blooms as long as this. That's for sure. No woody plant that flowers that long. Jumping back behind the Cestrum, all these things again are going to get rearranged once these giant azaleas that you can't see, well maybe you can see this one back here, are coming out. And then this stuff is either going to move back or forward or wherever it needs to be. It's just been in holding basically. This is a Camellia. It's a different species. Normally you'll see Camellia sasanquas, Camellia japonicas, some hybrids in most ornamental landscaping. This is Camellia handelii. Really great branching structure on this plant. Kind of has a bit of a weeping habit. Flowers are smaller than what we would get on Camellia sasanqua or Camellia japonicas. There's a broken branch right there. But has this great new burgundy foliage on it, has kind of a weeping habit as it grows. When it flowers, it is absolutely flower to flower, solid white. So even though the flowers are smaller, it has so many that the shrub just becomes completely white. There's a Encore Azalea just to the right there that Steph will move over to. That is Autumn Majesty, which is the double purple flowering Encore Azalea. It's one of those that's hardy in zone 6 to 10. It looks great there, but again, it's covered up by this Viburnum. This Viburnum's definitely moving out. I think that the Viburnum's going to move out and back. This Camellia is going to move back just a bit, and then that Azalea will finally have the space that it deserves. Again, that's a double flowering one. It was introduced maybe 3 years ago, and they're double flowering purple, and it just flowers incredibly profusely. We've had our spring flowering on it. It'll come back into flower in the fall and just be absolutely solid purple when it does. There's a pineapple sage, a yellow pineapple sage toward the back. This one's come back. This is the 3rd year it's come back, and these are kind of funny. They'll stay down kind of this low for a good part of the summer, maybe come up into this area, and then all of a sudden really blow up toward the end of summer, and they'll bloom in the fall. Any hummingbird that's left around will love those in the fall. And then that gold foliage is a real standout in the garden once it starts to get a little bit taller later in the season. Other things are kind of tired. And then some of these fall blooming things. We have, if you'll notice throughout this tour, there's early flowering shrubs, and then, some all summer flowering shrubs, and then fall flowering shrubs a few of those coming up as well. And then the same thing with the perennials, very early flowering perennials, summer flowering perennials, and fall flowering perennials. We're going for all of those. It's one of those things about going back and forth to your garden center a few times a year, and you can find those seasonal flowering things. The Leucothoe that's directly in front of it, that's hiding it right now, is called Burning Love. This thing really flowered amazingly well early in the season, and there you can see the remnants of the flowers on here now. White little dangling flowers, similar to a blueberry looking flower that you'll see on a lot of ericaceous plants, actually, the little dangling white flowers, but it was super showy. Then a flush of growth came out on it that was this beautiful burgundy. Here in the summer, it kind of settles into a bit of a green color. In the fall, it goes back to a burgundy color. It's this compact without us having to touch it. This is how it's grown the entire time. Part shade's kind of best on this plant, but right now we're filming a little more in the middle of the day than we normally do, and it's got some direct sun on it. If the clouds wasn't out, it would have some direct sun on it. About 2-3 hours a day. Well-drained soil on any of these Leucothoe. Other than that, just an easy plant. It's always changing and throughout the season. The Indian hawthorn that's up above it is kind of a tree-sized Indian hawthorn. We're going to see a dwarf Indian hawthorn in just a second. But Rosalinda has everything is large about it. It has much larger leaves than the dwarf Indian hawthorns, much larger stature, much larger flowers, and the flowers are fragrant. So it puts on these large clusters of pink flowers. We did protect this one a little bit during the winter time. During the December freeze, it had a couple blankets over the top of it. It's really kind of, It was really a little hard to protect it well, but we protected it enough that the flowers managed to survive through the winter, and we had flowers on it this spring. I've pruned it a bit to kind of allow the trunk on it to catch up a bit. Again, it's been tree formed. There's a lot of tree formed plants out here in this garden. You know, every one of these videos probably has something that we've limbed up into a tree, including the last video back here with the Miss Kim lilac, something we're going to see in the next video over here as well. But great plant, really clean foliage. A lot of Indian hawthorns have a lot of leaf spot problems. This one has super clean foliage. New growth is burgundy. Really love this plant. Lots of Torenia out here in the garden. We had it in several of the tour videos. It shows up. Really easy annual plant that, you know, super showy. As Steph said, the little flowers look like it's somebody singing. It's like an open mouth and they're singing. It's been pretty dry. We're supposed to get a lot of thunderstorms, several rounds of storms this week. So I'm hoping some of these annuals that have been in dry spaces will start to take off. There's an oriental spruce here called Nigra compacta, doing great out here in the full sun in our front garden. Most of these oriental spruces feel like rope when you touch them. You'd have to touch this. It's really tactile feeling that you get. So yeah, they're easy to identify for me because I can just walk up, roll this in my finger a little bit, and it feels like a little rope. Anyway, great little green conifer, super slow growing. A bit hot here for it in zone 8A or 7B here in Raleigh. This is a Sedum. Sedum sichotense, I believe. I'm probably butchering that species name. This one gets out and gets going. The pollinators absolutely love it. There's a little non-stinging wasp right there flying around it. I've seen honeybees on it since I squatted down. I've seen native bees on it as well. Really nice little ground cover, covering some space there. It'll try to get up in these shrubs. We'll cut it away from it a little bit. No problem at all. There's one of these blue star creepers up in the front right here, but it's a white flowering version of it. This sedum tries to get up on top of it. We'll pull it back from it some. That thing actually needs a little bit of water right now. And there's a Penstemon here. It's one of our native Penstemons. This one's actually called Blackbeard. All the new growth on it's this dark kind of purple color. It's just bloomed out once and we've cut it back. It'll flush back out from the middle. We'll get some additional flowers on it. We've added a few more Everillo carex into this bed. They're small, just newly planted ones. We showed them off in the back a couple videos ago. There were some bigger Everillos, but we'll fill this in with a gold color, and then all of these bulbs we have planted that have already faded back for the most part. You know, they'll come up through the sedum in the future, flower, and then retreat, and we won't have to look at it so long because these will be filled in this space. I've said this in every video, these annual borders that we have along the turf out here and along the patio in the back, I'm not going to name all the plants in them because we just recently put videos up on the annual plantings, but it is a combination of salvias, ageratum, celosia, acufia, struggling with some words here, and cufia, and there's maybe something else in there, but there's several different ageratum, different colors of ageratum, and again, different salvias. There's a native bee here on that one at the end, but this one's finally filling in. It's taken a little while for our annuals to get going because it's just been cooler this year. One plant here that's being moved back further when the azaleas come out is this Viburnum luzonicum. This is a Southern Living Plant Collection variety called Snow Joey. Very heavy flowering, viburnum in clusters. Really nice. It's really a great looking plant. Very upright, kind of narrow habit to it. I'll rein it in a bit, and it's going to go back up here in the corner once this construction is finished in the next few weeks. And that's going to, again, allow us to rearrange a couple things back there that have literally just been in storage while we waited for this project to start on the house. This is the other Indian hawthorn we have. This one's called Clean Sweep Snowbank. This Clean Sweep is a series. There's going to be more of these released. This is the white one called Snowbank. Blooms heavily, white flowers in the spring, just like we would expect from an Indian hawthorn. But it was selected because it doesn't get leaf spot issues. And this is the cleanest dwarf Indian hawthorn I've seen in 20 years. I mean, it really is truly the cleanest Indian hawthorn I've seen in 20 years. There's not a spot on it. So whoever did, I don't know, I actually don't know who did the breeding on this, but it's kind of wild after watching Indian hawthorns kind of decline a bit over the last couple of decades. And they're such great ornamental full sun plants. You know, this is a plant you can keep 2.5 feet tall, 3.5 feet wide for the next 20 years and have it bloom every spring and have it be evergreen. I mean, it's hard to miss with this plant. But again, we've got a good one available now. There's another one of these boxwoods that we'll be talking more about later in the year. These are blight-resistant boxwoods. I have 4 varieties out here. Sometime in the fall, there'll be videos on these coming. This is a pretty exciting group of boxwoods in various sizes, like upright and narrow, little low-growing one that's more, you know, small holly sized, that kind of thing. But a boxwood for everybody, a shape for everybody. This is a stachys, and we really love these stachys. Look how clean, look at the foliage on this plant. Let's just look how good that is. What if that didn't flower? Who would care, right? It does flower. Pollinators absolutely love it. This variety is called Hummelo. We have a couple other stachys as well that we've added to the garden. Oh, there's another one coming up in just a second that's real small, that's new. And I missed one agapanthus back here. We have lots of agapanthus in the garden. They all came back from the December freeze, expecting flowers on them all summer. And in fact, in the next video in this series, there'll be a few more that are in flower. A little further down, there's a Gara here. This one is called Sparkling White. You can see, very showy white. One of my, you know, kind of go-to garden perennials. This one actually has a few aphids up here on the top of it, and I'm not even going to think about them. They don't matter. Most of the plant does not have any. Just got all that new tender growth on it. May have been stressed for whatever reason. Ends up with a few aphids. Who cares? It's still blooming. Plant looks great. There's powwow white echinacea back here. It's not showing any color. So we somehow ended up with several of these. I think maybe we found them in a 4-pack at some point, and that's why we have quite a few of them. But you're going to see the one out by the road in the next video. It's like 4 times bigger than this one. Again, a direct result of the putting these in too much improved soil actually shrinks them. Doesn't seem like that would be the case. There's a conifer here. This is a Chamaecyparis obtusa called Chirimen. It's maybe Steph's favorite plant in the garden, or certainly top 5 plants in the garden. Cool little fingery looking thing, soft to the touch. It'll get quite tall over time. I've seen one of these very, very tall. Just an interesting, very interesting plant. We're gonna have a couple other Chamaecyparis obtusas coming up and maybe 2 videos ahead of this one. And they look nothing like this. It's incredible how much range of different looks there are in that group, in that species, how much human breeding has gone on in them. This is a Japanese maple called pink filigree. Great looking Japanese maple. We got this one from Mr. Maple last year, planted it here in the fall. Deer came along in the winter and bit the top of it off. I have no idea of all the things in this garden to decide to eat. Didn't eat the Indian hawthorn. Indian hawthorns are always at the top of their list. I'd have them walk around everything in the nursery to get to roses and Indian hawthorns. Decided that the top of a Japanese maple dormant in the wintertime was the thing to bite. So it's flushed back out of that. It's going to take a little while to get it back into shape. There's another one of those stachys right here. This one is literally just gone in the ground. But I do love the foliage on those. Here's another agapanthus coming up. That one is ever amethyst. So we'll see a flower spike on that one pretty soon. There's this Salvia nemorosa is called Salute White. This one's been blooming really great. I mean, really pretty far into the season for us for a nemorosa. A lot of times we'll get nemorosas bloom early for us, and then we have lots of other salvias that just kind of take their place, and you know, including the sage on the other side of the bed over here that will be later in the fall. So lots of things in that family that just keep flowering throughout the summer. Usually these are kind of quit on us by mid-June. I suspect it's because we've had some cooler nights, but it's still got tons of buds on it. I think it'll be blooming for a few weeks. You can cut these nemorosas back. We've got one coming up in the next video as well. You'll get a few flowers on them, but they don't really completely rebloom. There's a lantana back here called Bandana Yellow. This thing's been stepped on about 5 times in the process of mulching and everything else. It'll be this tall though by the end of the season. No matter how many times I try to step on it, it's still going to be this tall and this wide in this space by the end of summer. And the pollinators absolutely love those things. But it came back from last year. It's another one I can kind of add to the list that I know are hardy here, because the list is about 5 or so that I know always come back. This one came back from a particularly nasty freeze in December. Not talking about the shrubs in the containers, but there is a Serendipity Magnolia in here and a David Viburnum. Just kind of a couple interesting shrubs that we have in this container. This is a Deutzia scabra. The species is Scabra variegata. So it bloomed earlier in the spring. It just has a really nice texture, nice variegation in the leaves. The variegation starts out kind of a chartreuse and green and then settles into a white as it ages. So you'll see a difference in the leaf going down the stem like that. This is it's a nice little ornamental plant. Just a great little ornamental plant. So Viburnum back here, this is a sweet Viburnum, and sweet Viburnums, they got pretty nuked down in Texas during that Texas freeze a few years ago. These are definitely, typically we'll say zone 8 to 10. We're in 7B here in Raleigh. I've got it kind of up here closer to the house, and I haven't had any problem on them thus far. Haven't really, a little bit of thinning from that December freeze, but overall, I haven't really had any problem. Again, if you were going to do a sweet Viburnum in zone 7B, 8A, I would put them in definitely try to put them in a protected space. There is a balloon flower about to open down here, and I don't remember if it was white or blue, but I'll know in a few days. Here's another very tender plant, and another reason we have it tucked up next to the porch as well. This is a ficus hybrid between Ficus pumila and one other. It's called Ruth Bancroft. We saw this down in South Carolina growing on a wall. It dies back to the ground and comes back and covers the wall every year down in South Carolina. Again, it's not going to be completely cold hardy for us, so we've got it tucked up in a corner there. If we had extreme cold, I might throw a sheet or something over top of it, but man, this thing has hit the ground running. It's only been in the ground for just a few weeks, and it's grown 1.5 feet already probably. This is a Utopia plum yew in this container. It's one we haven't shown in a while, and it has been in that container for over 2 years. It's got some wire vine growing under it, little Vinca major as well growing under it. But that is it's a good looking evergreen. It's stretched a little bit because it's almost in too much shade, but it is a part shade, dry shade evergreen plant. This container down on the first step, that's a Dipladenia. It's similar to a mandevilla, but they don't climb as much. It will climb on this rail a little bit during the season, but nothing like a mandevilla. It'll run up a few climbers, but it blooms as more like a little shrub rather than a vine like a mandevilla. The container on the other side of the front porch has an Obsession Nandina. This one's not in quite enough sun to really color up, but you can see here in June that it does have a lot of that burgundy color on it. If I took it out and got it another hour or two of direct sun, it would be solid, that color. Same thing in the winter time, but Obsession Nandina is a great Nandina, and it doesn't flower, doesn't berry, so it's not an invasive Nandina, but it's just a great pop of color out in the garden. There's some variegated Solomon seal at the end of the opposite end of the bed, the north side of the foundation bed here. It's confined by the brick driveway and a retaining wall behind it, but man, is this stuff, once it gets going like this, it can really take over a space. So I suggest if you have a confined space like this is where you would use it. This is a spot that gets a good amount of sun, probably a hair more than it would like, but it's doing just fine. There used to be a big maple in the front garden that shaded it more, but it's still doing fine. It's really not burning at all. It's already flowered, and it looks good, but again, it's got to be contained, otherwise it will just run everywhere. We'll take a piece up out of the ground. You can literally just pull a piece up or cut a piece out with a shovel and stick it in a container and use it as a container plant pretty easily. This is a Rudbeckia, Goldsturm Rudbeckia that'll start blooming pretty soon. Planted this last year. Rabbits ate it for an entire season and ultimately made it this full. So I think this is one of the rare wins I got from a rabbit eating something, but it would not stop eating it all season long, kept it about 3 or 4 inches tall, never bloomed last year. And this year, we've been rewarded with a very full one. This thuja is called highlights. So there are several of these gold upright thujas like this. Be careful putting these thujas, any of them, on the corner in a spot where a dog might pee on it, okay? Because every time Griffin wants to come through this little path here, he's trying to target this thing. And it doesn't take but a tiny bit of urine. It doesn't have any burn on it now, but it did a couple times last year. Any urine on this plant, it's just not tolerant of it at all. There's other things out here, and you might want to look up salt tolerant plants if you do have this issue with dogs burning plants. And then put, that Obsession nandina we showed you up on the porch, great plant that would be resistant to dog urine. Slap that thing on the corner, and then every time they go by a corner, they like to mark those spots. That'll be a plant that would tolerate it. There's some dianthus here that has come back for a couple of seasons. I'm kind of in favor of taking it out in between seasons, but then it stays looking pretty good. And here we are in the middle of June with this kind of annual fall and winter blooming dianthus. But it is perennial. If it doesn't get a lot, it is perennial occasionally. And for some reason, all of ours has been perennial here in this house. We have some vinca planted down in the middle of it. The vinca will eventually fill in as the heat is eventually going to slow these down for the season. At that point, we'll probably just cut them in half and let the vinca grow up above them for the rest of the season. This is a Taxus baccata, or it's a yew. This variety is called Aureomarginata. There's actually a couple of these gold yews. This thing will get quite big, quite big. In fact, I saw a Taxus baccata, a green Taxus baccata over in Berlin. It was probably 25 feet tall and 25 feet wide. This variegated version is going to grow very, very slowly. It's only put on about 3 inches of growth this year, less on most of the plant. Only 3 pieces have grown more than 2 inches. It can stay here for years, so we'll just let it get about this big over the next few years. Once it reaches some point where it no longer fits the space, I'll put a shovel under it, move it to another spot, give it away, put it in a container, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're gonna get 5 years out of it sitting in this space without any problem. And then there's one additional sweet viburnum, sugar cookie viburnum. This one's a Southern Living Plant Collection variety. You can see it was picked because it's incredibly compact. Just a really incredibly compact habit. Again, you're gonna get those fragrant flowers. Marginally hardy here in my area of Raleigh, but man, when it's looking good, it is really, really looking good. So that's the front foundation plants. A couple things on the porch. All of this siding, all of this is big construction coming in, 2 weeks from now on the front of the house, and these azaleas are coming out, and then we're going to have a lot of content related to, how we're going to redesign these front beds going forward. So thank you guys for following along. Stay tuned for part 8.